So this is Rublev, and that's me, and we practice together. Let me explain how this happened. So I guess it all started when I got this message.
Hey Cam, just messaging to see if you'd be interested in doing some pro hitting at Boodles next week. Let me know.
And well, this is an opportunity I was not going to miss. So the Boodles is an event which I think is quite under the radar. It's an exhibition event just before Wimbledon that attracts the very top pros, and they kind of use it as a way to get a bit of match practice, do some training, and essentially just chill out a little bit before the start of the tournament. Now I have hit with some players here in the past who I'd say are pretty decent, but getting footage was a bit of a struggle. So this year, as I was going to be there the whole week, I really tried my best to get as many videos as I could. So the first thing I did was pick up my accreditation, because without that, I wasn't going to be going anywhere. I then met up with Alex, who was the other hitting partner, and we struck a few balls before it was time to find out who we were going to practice with. And yeah, that's when I was told I was going to be playing with Andrey Rublev. Alright, so I'm going to keep this session pretty unedited because I want to give a real glimpse of what it was actually like to be there and what it felt like being at that practice session, and kind of give a real understanding of how long the rallies were, the amount of errors that were made, how long rest we had, and all that kind of stuff, because I think that's really interesting to share and not just show like the best couple rallies that we had. So this session is going to be quite long, unedited, and just to give you guys a real glimpse of what it is like to be there. So after I set up the camera and the sitzer passes came off court, I was just waiting at the net for Rublev to arrive with his coach, and that's when he asked me to hit a few balls with him. And I kind of knew that this might be a little bit of a test, because over previous years I have seen some of the other hitting partners play, and the coaches kind of like test them out to see if they're good enough to play with the player first. So I was actually a little bit more nervous for hitting with the coach than I was for hitting with Rublev. I mean, he might have just been wanting to warm me up for Rublev, but I think it was kind of like just testing the water to make sure that I could actually hit a decent ball and I'd be good enough to play with Rublev. So I really wanted to try and play well here, put some good intensity on the court, and in these first few warm-up rallies just show that I can be consistent enough to do a good hit with Rublev. And as I was hitting, I could see him arriving out the corner of my eye, getting set up by the side of the court, and I really just tried to focus on what I was doing in that moment and just carry on rallying with the coach, trying to get good contacts on the ball and try and be super consistent and really get my eye in ready for the hit. Now, during these warm-up rallies, I was definitely prioritising my forehand, because whenever I'm starting to feel a little bit tight, I always go to that forehand because I feel more comfortable hitting that. So when the coach hit one to my backhand there, I got a little bit tight on it, but I'm glad I got that out before the hit started with Rublev. Now you can see on the other court, Alex just finished hitting with Dusan Lajovic, and he's about to walk across the court over here. And I think what's really cool about this event is that you can see how all the players and coaches interact with each other. And I think it's really cool to see how friendly they are with each other, and just the way that they interact with each other. And being a hitting partner for this event means that you're allowed in all the players' areas and in the players' lounge and stuff, so you're able to chat and talk to the coaches and the players if they're up for it, and ask them some questions. So I think that's another really cool experience that I got from this event, was being able to just learn and just ask questions about different things that I wouldn't be able to do in other circumstances. And I also think it was really interesting to see how the different players approached this event in preparation for Wimbledon, because as a hitting partner, I didn't know if I was going to be going on the court to do a proper training session for like an hour and a half doing different drills, or if it was going to be more like just a warm-up hit for the exhibition match, so like 20 minutes or so. So for me going into it, I wasn't given any pre-warning as to what we were going to do. I was just expected to turn up and do whatever I was asked of and just be ready for anything, basically. And I think this kind of added to the nerves a little bit, because you just didn't know what was going to happen and you couldn't visualize what the session was going to look like in your head beforehand. You didn't know if you're going to have to play points or if you're just going to have to be solid, just rallying for half an hour or so. But I think this was a really good way to learn to be adaptable and go with the flow and just be able to perform no matter what was coming towards you. All right, so it was at this point that I could see Rublev starting to get his headband out, and I knew that the session was going to start soon. So these last few rallies with the coach were a little bit more chilled. I kind of relaxed a little bit more, went through the ball a little bit more, not really worried about making an error here or there. I just wanted to get a few bigger hits out on the court before I had to deal with the Rublev forehand. So I was starting to get the vibe that the session was going to be a little bit more of a chilled, extended warm-up hit kind of vibe rather than a full-on training session with lots of different drills in it, just because of the way that the coaches and the players were acting. They seemed a little bit more relaxed, joking around a little bit and kind of just giving off a sort of vibe of a pre-match warm-up kind of session. And in a way, this can kind of be a little bit even more intimidating because of how relaxed players are during a warm-up session. Normally, they don't really tend to be so concerned about the amount of errors that they're making as opposed to a full-on training session. They just want to hit through the ball, feel relaxed, and just really get a feeling for having a good contact and a good pop on the ball. But for me, as the hitting partner, it's kind of a little bit different in these first few rallies here, because if they want to go through the ball and miss a couple, that's absolutely fine. But for me, I need to put as many balls in the court as I can to give them the rhythm that they need to feel good on the court. So in these first few rallies, I was really interested to see how the session started, as I wasn't sure if it was going to start in the service box, if we were going to go straight to the back, if it was going to go out at match tempo, because all the pros have a different way that they like to start the session. But for this one, it was just slow paced from the back of the court, and then gradually after 10 to 20 balls, the pace increased faster and faster until it got to more around pro match tempo. And what I think was funny when it started was that beforehand I kind of built it up in my head like, oh my god, I'm going to play with Rublev. But as soon as we started hitting some balls, it was just like, oh, I do this every day. I'm hitting balls whilst I'm training with loads of different players, whilst I'm coaching, and it's no different really. And you just got to try and treat the hit like it's any other player so that you can just relax and hit the ball the way that you normally do. I think here we can really see the switch in intensity. We went from a couple slow balls to suddenly intense, grunting, decent footwork, and it's really interesting to see it on the camera because I could really feel that in the moment. I could really feel some faster balls coming at me really quickly. Alright, so I actually think so far so good. Rublev increased the tempo quite early on there, so I had to really adjust my footwork and my backswing, really trying to make the backswing a lot smaller to deal with the fast balls coming towards me and get a lot lower with my legs. But a couple late balls there, but not too many errors, so a good start. We can see him still feeling a little bit tight on that backhand side, so I really just had to trust in the backhand, relax the wrists and just go through the ball. I find that really difficult, not only because you're playing with a pro, but because it's on the grass court as well, and there are some bad bounces on the grass court, so sometimes you want to hesitate a little bit or hold back slightly just in case there's a bad bounce, but you just have to relax and go through it. And if it's a bad bounce and you frame it, then you frame it. But you've got to hit every shot as if you're going to go through the ball and hit it properly and not try and second guess the bounce every time. Okay, moving into the forehand cross court now, and this is the moment that I was most nervous for, trying to deal with that Rublev forehand cross court on the grass court. It was going to be tough. And we can see straight away that I'm struggling to find the timing and the direction in the cross court. So I had to make another adjustment, and I already made my swing feel a lot smaller on the backswing, but I had to really make it feel as small as possible now. On the screen, it kind of looks like I'm still doing like a normal size backswing, but trust me, in real life, when I made that second adjustment, it honestly felt like I was hardly taking the racket back at all. And as soon as I made that adjustment of the smaller backswing, it felt completely different. Like, at first in those cross-court rallies, I felt like I had zero time whatsoever. I was being completely rushed and the shots were coming through really fast. But as soon as I made that adjustment, it suddenly started feeling a little bit more normal and a little bit more like my normal training sessions. So just by changing that little thing, it suddenly made the shot that I was facing feel completely different, even though it was exactly the same. Now, moving on to the ad side, this is quite interesting because what a lot of players will do is they'll just prioritize their backhand on this side to get a feeling for the backhand. But Rublev was kind of camping out by the tram lines and just hitting massive inside out forehands. And then occasionally he'd hit a massive one inside in. And this is interesting because I think it really shows that this hit was definitely more of like an extended warm up for a match, because that's the pattern that you'd use in a match situation. You'd use that forehand in zone C, trying to hit a couple inside out and then hit a big one inside in. So that really told me that this hit was in preparation for the exhibition match that he was about to play. What I also found really insightful was to see the amount of errors that the pro players made, not just in this session, but in the sessions across the board, in both my hitting sessions and Alex's hitting sessions. I think that's just because the focus wasn't on being super consistent. The focus was on hitting through the ball, feeling your shots and feeling loose and ready to attack it in a match situation. Which made it tough for me because there were lots of fast balls coming towards me, when normally when you're warming up for a match you do like a few more consistent rallies, and I've seen some of the other players hitting it's a few more consistent, but I think for Rublev here it was really just trying to be loose and hit through the ball, and that was the real focus. And I'm 100% sure that if these top guys want to make 200 balls in a row, they're going to be able to make 200 balls in a row. But it's just about having an intention behind your practice, and I don't think the intention in these practices were to be consistent. Maybe it's because it's at an exhibition event and they're a bit more relaxed, but it might just be because, as I said, the intention is to be loose during a shot and really go through the ball. And I've heard stories about Nadal's practices in the past where he hits really, really big in practice, makes a ton of errors, and then he's able to rein it in a match situation. So I think it's tough to read into these practices and apply it to your own game, because watching these guys make a few errors doesn't mean that it's okay for you to go on the practice court and slap balls all over the place and make errors. You've got to have intention. You've got to have a session where you're thinking, okay, this one's going to be consistency based. You're visualizing a tight situation in the match where you're going to be needing to make a lot of balls. But if you're warming up for a match, then it's okay to make a few errors if you're being loose, because you've done the hard work with the consistency in your training. So I think you got to kind of read between the lines a little bit here. Another key thing to notice here is that we spent a lot more time on the ad side than we did on the deuce side. Literally, the deuce side was only a few rallies, and now we spent a lot more time doing that inside-out forehand. And I think that's really telling of the modern game and modern matches, and the importance of being able to be strong with your forehand within zone C, going inside out for a few balls and then going inside in. And we can see in this practice here, he spent a few minutes going inside out on the forehand, and then a few minutes just rolling a few forehands inside out and then really hitting big on that inside in down the line. I started to lose the consistency a little bit there in those couple rallies, so I really told myself to refocus, breathe out when I'm hitting the ball, and really focus on the seams of the ball when it's coming towards me. Such a simple thing to do, but it really helps when you start to lose your timing and your rhythm a little bit. This was the first time during the session where I really felt blown away off the forehand, because I was hitting some decent rally balls there and it was still going really fast past me, and if I was trying to play a point situation against him there'd be no way I'd be getting behind that ball. So it just really shows that the quality of my shot in the rally, if I was to do a point, would have to be so much higher than that, with a lot more depth and rising over the baseline and sideline with much more intensity, because the camera doesn't really do it justice how fast that ball was traveling down the line. Alright, so I feel like I got through the toughest part of the session there. I dealt with the forehand on the cross courts, and next we moved on to some volleys and smashes. And here it was all about just getting a good contact point, staying really low, keeping that small backswing, and just keeping it in the slot so that he could get a consistent volley rhythm going. And something to note here with his footwork is that he actually started a lot of the volley rallies from around the service line area and then worked his way forward towards the net once the rally continued going a little bit longer. And then once a ball was missed, often he'd move back towards the service line again and then start moving forward again. And this is interesting because when you're volleying in a match situation, often your first volley will be around the service line area, but if you're warming up, your volley's always from quite close to the net or halfway between the service line and the net. You never really practice that first volley positioning. So I think this is a really cool way to keep moving forward through the volleys and practice different type of volleys when you're just warming up for a match. And then my focus when it came on to smashes, it was just about feeding up high enough balls so that it was a little bit challenging for him, but then not challenging enough that it would be pushing him all the way back to the baseline. And I say this a lot, but I actually think feeding up good smashes is one of the hardest skills in tennis, because you've got to be really soft with your hands when the ball's coming really fast towards you, and placing it at the perfect location in the court when you're hitting the ball that slowly off a fast ball is actually a really tough thing to do. Okay, so we took a little drinks break next. And I knew that the session was going to come to an end pretty soon because it was almost time for him to go on court to play his exhibition match, and he had to do a bunch of media stuff beforehand. So I was pretty sure that next it was just serve and return. And this is something that I was thinking about quite a lot before the start of the session, because I've been going through quite a lot of technical changes in my serve and experimenting with different things. So I was trying to decide whether I should go for the new thing that I was trying out or whether to stick back to what I was doing before. And I ended up just deciding to keep going with the new serve, where I was going for a platform stance and slightly more abbreviated, because that's what I did the last few days and I got a bit more comfortable with that. But it's always tough to go into a match situation or a situation like this where you have to make a lot of serves when you're going through some technical changes, because that can introduce a bit of tightness within your swing, and if you're not fully relaxed and comfortable with the changes that you've made yet, then you can create a lot of errors. So that's why I was a little bit apprehensive about the serving, but I did do quite a lot of warm-up serves beforehand, so I was hoping that it was going to be alright. But if we just focus now on the way that Rublev's warming up his serve here, it's really interesting to see him stepping into the court, kind of like the way that Federer used to do, because I think this really helps create the looseness within your swing, and this really seems like a key thing for him here with the way that he was hitting the ball earlier on his serve. I think just getting that looseness is just so important, and something that I need to do more of in my warm-ups before my own matches, because I tend to start with the matches quite tight. So maybe I can take some of these things that I've learned from my hit with Rublev into my own warm-ups to try and bring that looseness straight into matches when I play them. So after those initial few serves that he hit, when he was stepping into them, it looked like he didn't really care about making them or not. But now he's taking a little bit more time before each serve, doing a full pinpoint serve and bouncing the ball a couple times beforehand. It looks like he's putting a little bit more attention onto where he's hitting the ball and his placement. And my focus on returning here was just to try and make as many returns as I could. It's not often you get the chance to return against a top 10 player. So I was just trying to get a racket on the ball, topspin if I could, and get it back in play. Because sometimes these pros like to practice their ball three as well. So sometimes they just leave it and let the return go past them, but sometimes they'd like to hit a shot afterwards. So they didn't say anything to me beforehand, but I was just trying to make as many as I could here. It's also important to bear in mind that I know where the serve is going. So it looks like I'm actually doing pretty decent and making quite a lot of returns. But if I didn't know where this ball was going, then I'd be struggling a lot more, and I definitely wouldn't be getting as many topspin as I have here, or even a racket on as many as I had here. So yeah, that's something that is important to keep in mind whilst watching this. And with regards to the pace of the serve, it's obviously fast, but I wouldn't say it's that much faster than players that I'm playing against in futures tournaments. But I will say that it was a lot more accurate and a lot more consistent. And I think that the difference really lies in a match situation, is that he's going to be able to execute the accuracy, the consistency and the power on the big points, whereas players at the lower down on the future circuit won't be able to execute that serve on the big points. So if you look at it kind of like on a technical basis, or just whilst people are warming up, it might look pretty similar, and it might feel pretty similar for me whilst I'm returning it, but it's that accuracy and that attention to detail on high pressure situations that really separates the very top players from the lower down professional level players. Another thing to notice here whilst he's serving is the amount of time that he's taking before his serve, really being patient, bouncing the ball, not rushing. Everything looks like it's in his control, and he's just really focusing on what he wants to do with that serve. I think sometimes when I'm serving, I definitely rush through it a little bit too much and don't take my time. And I often don't really concentrate on my placement too much when I'm warming up my serve. But here, because he was telling me where he was going, I knew that he was going to be going out wide, and I could tell that he was trying to really get it in that specific slot each time. And it's just a great way to practice your serve in your location without putting targets out anywhere. If you tell your opponent where you want to serve, then you can really aim to that specific location and try and get it really as good as possible there. Then you can practice all your spots whilst you're warming up, and it kind of counts as a little bit of serving practice. We can see here now that the attention has shifted from the serve to the ball after the serve. Obviously, you're still trying to get the serve in, but it really looks like he's trying to really attack with that forehand after the serve now and really get used to that aggression and that momentum that you get from the serve going into that forehand straight after. Okay, final part of the session now. So it was just time for him to feel a few returns. So it was up to me to try and hit my spots and really try and get accuracy. I always think it's better in these type of hits to get it in, even if it's slightly slower than you'd want it to be, just so that they can hit more balls than trying to play too big at too high level and miss quite a few, especially when it comes to serving, because if you miss quite a few serves in a row, then they're going to be standing there for about 30-40 seconds having not hit a ball, and that's the last thing you want to do when you're the hitting partner. So I'd just try to get it in, and then if I made a few in a row at a decent pace, and I'd try and up the pace a little bit, and then if I missed that one, then I'd lower the pace again, because at the end of the day they just want to feel some returns and not stand there for a minute or two. One thing that I haven't mentioned yet, which I did find really cool for these practice sessions, was that the practice courts were located right next to the centre court. So you can see at the end of the second court, there's like a big stand area, and that's literally the centre court right there. So often you got a lot of people standing across the top looking down at the practice sessions, but then also right behind the courts, there was kind of like a food area there. So a lot of people would wait in there, eat their food and watch these practice sessions. So really cool for the spectators to get a feel for what these practice sessions look like, but also cool for me as a hitting partner, having a little bit of an audience whilst practicing with these pros, which made the practice session extra special and put on a little bit more pressure because you want to perform well when there's a crowd. But overall, it was just a really, really cool experience. While I was hitting these serves, what I found quite funny was how far back Rublev was standing to return my serve. Obviously, he's so used to returning against massive servers, and so he's obviously just standing in his normal location for that. But when people play against me, and even like at the futures level against most servers, no players tend to stand back that far, partly because there isn't that much space behind the courts on the courts that we're playing on. But he's standing so far back here that we can't even see him on the camera. And you only see him when he's hitting through the return, he's coming forward. So I thought that was interesting to see in real life of actually how far the normal returning position is behind the baseline. Interestingly, as I've just said that, as we moved on to the other side, he's actually standing a little bit close to the baseline here. So maybe he's just practicing standing back and standing forward to vary his returning position when he gets into the match situation, and just practicing taking some returns a little bit earlier and taking some returns a little bit further back where he's letting it drop a little bit more. And I think this is a really cool camera angle to see his footwork on the return, the way that he's stepping forward into a staggered split step, landing just after my contacts with my serve. It really helps him go towards the ball and then keep his body weight going forward. And I think that's really cool to see from this angle. And yeah, that's pretty much the session coming to the end, to be honest. Only a couple more serves to go, and then he was going to go and do a bit of media and then get ready for his exhibition match. And that was my hitting done for day one. Absolutely surreal experience. Never thought that I'd be able to practice with a top 10 player and feel the level, and on the grass court as well. It's absolutely crazy. Remember when I got home, I couldn't quite believe that it actually happened, and I practiced with a player at that level. So yeah, completely crazy, and even crazier that there were still 3 more days to go and I had no idea who I was going to practice with. But for day one, that was my hitting done. And I'm so happy that I was able to record the whole of this session and be able to document it on my YouTube channel. And I'm just so grateful to have been able to have this experience of playing with such high quality level players for so many days in a row.